Clara Walker had always imagined her return to the old ranch would be different. After years of living in the busy city, she thought coming back to the place that had once felt like home would be a peaceful and nostalgic experience. But as her car pulled down the long, dusty road toward the ranch, she could feel the weight of the past pressing against her chest. The land hadn't changed much, but Clara had, and the memories that filled the air seemed to hang over her like a thick fog. She had left the ranch a decade ago, when she was just starting to figure out who she was. Life in the city had been different, exciting, fast-paced, and filled with new opportunities. But with her father's sudden passing, Clara found herself back at the one place she thought she'd left behind forever. Her father's ranch, her family's legacy, was now in her hands, and she wasn't sure what to do with it. As Clara pulled up to the large wooden house, she stared at the familiar porch, the wide, open fields beyond it, and the barns in the distance. Everything seemed so much smaller than she remembered, but the emotions that rushed through her memories of family, of hard work, and of a love that never fully left her felt as real as ever. She had spent years trying to forget the things that had happened here, particularly with a certain man who had been a huge part of her life. Graham Caldwell, the rancher next door. They'd been more than just neighbors once they'd been lovers, in a way that made her heart race just thinking about it. But that had ended badly. It had been a messy breakup, full of hurt feelings and unspoken words. Clara never quite understood why things ended the way they did, and it had taken her years to move past it. But now, as she stepped out of her car and breathed in the fresh country air, she couldn't help but think of Graham. She wondered if he had changed, if the years had softened him in the way time had softened her. And when she saw him again, there would be no pretending. The feelings, the tension, would be there, just like they always had been. The first time she saw Graham again was at a small town meeting. Clara wasn't expecting him to be there, but as soon as she stepped into the crowded room, her eyes landed on him. He hadn't changed much, just a little older, a little rough around the edges. His broad shoulders, dark eyes, and the way he carried himself were still as intimidating as ever. He stood at the back of the room, arms crossed, listening to the chatter around him. The moment their gazes met, it was like the room disappeared. Time seemed to slow down, and Clara's heart skipped a beat. He didn't smile. He didn't even wave. Graham had always been a man of few words, and it was clear that nothing had changed. Still, there was an undeniable pull between them, one that Clara couldn't ignore, no matter how hard she tried. She quickly turned her attention to the meeting, trying to ignore the way her pulse quickened. After the meeting, she found herself walking out of the building, only to be stopped by the sound of a familiar voice. Clara. His voice was low, like the rumble of thunder in the distance. It made her stomach flip, even though she hadn't heard it in years. She turned around to see Graham standing just a few feet away, his face as unreadable as always. He looked the same, but there was something different about him now, a hardness in his gaze, maybe, or depth that hadn't been there before. "You're back," he said simply. His words were not a question, but a statement, as if he had been expecting it all along. Clara nodded, unsure of what to say. "I'm handling my father's estate," she replied, her voice softer than she intended. "I didn't expect to see you here." Graham's lips twitched, but he didn't smile. Small town. People notice when someone's gone for a while and comes back. There was a long silence between them. Clara felt the weight of their past settle in the air around them, making it hard to breathe. She had spent so many years running from this place, from him. But now she realized that some things never leave you. The connection they shared, the way their lives had been intertwined for so long, it wasn't something that could simply be forgotten. "I wasn't expecting to be back either," Clara said after a moment. "But here I am." Graham's eyes softened just for a moment before he nodded. "Well, if you need anything, let me know. The ranch is right next door." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Clara standing in the parking lot, feeling like she had just stepped back in time. She didn't know what to make of the encounter, or the feelings that had rushed back into her chest the moment she saw him. She hadn't wanted to return to this place, to him, but now that she was here, Everything seemed to be falling into place in a way she hadn't expected. The next few days were filled with paperwork, phone calls, and the slow process of sorting through her father's belongings. Clara spent most of her time at the ranch, going through the old house and deciding what needed to be sold and what should be kept. The memories were thick, almost suffocating, but she couldn't bring herself to leave just yet. Something kept her there, something she couldn't quite explain. One afternoon, while walking across the fields to check on the horses, Clara ran into Graham again. This time, he was working on a fence near the property line. His shirt was rolled up at the sleeves, and his hands were covered in dirt and sweat. He didn't notice her approach, so Clara stood for a moment, watching him for a brief moment. She saw him as he used to be strong, focused, determined. It was the way she had remembered him when they were together. And in that moment, all the old feelings came rushing back. She quickly shook her head, trying to push them away. Graham finally noticed her standing there. "Need something?" he asked, his tone flat but not unkind. Clara took a deep breath. "I was just checking on things. You know, making sure everything's okay." He raised an eyebrow. "Everything's fine. But if you want, you can help me with the fence." Clara hesitated. She hadn't planned on working, but something about the way he asked made her feel like it was the right thing to do. Maybe she was just looking for a way to avoid the quiet house, the endless memories that seemed to follow her everywhere. She nodded. "All right, I'll help." They worked in silence for a while, side by side, repairing the fence. Clara could feel the old connection between them, the way their movements seemed to match, the way they could work together without words. It was easy, like it had always been. The silence was comfortable, but there was an underlying tension, a feeling that something was about to change after a few hours. As the sun began to set, Clara realized just how much she had missed this being outside, being with someone who understood her, who shared her history. But there was still something she couldn't shake, the fear of getting too close again, the fear of falling back into something that had once hurt her so deeply. "Thanks for helping," Graham said, breaking the silence as they finished. He wiped his hands on his jeans and turned to her. His eyes were dark, unreadable, but there was something in them that made Clara's heart race. She didn't know what to say. Instead, she simply nodded. "I should get going." As she walked back toward the house, she couldn't help but glance over her shoulder. Graham was still standing there, watching her, his eyes following her every move. The past wasn't done with them yet, and Clara knew it. Whether she was ready for it or not, the pull between them was still there, and this time, she wasn't sure she wanted to fight it. After that afternoon spent working together on the fence, Clara couldn't get Graham out of her mind. It wasn't just the way his hands had moved so efficiently, or how his eyes seemed to pierce through her like they had all those years ago. No, it was the way everything about him made her feel like nothing had changed. As much as she had tried to distance herself from this place, from him, Clara realized now that the connection between them was as strong as ever. Days passed, but every time she saw him, whether it was in town or working on the ranch, the same electric pull seemed to draw her closer. Clara tried to ignore it. She told herself that she was here to handle her father's estate, not to rekindle old flames or open old wounds. But when their paths crossed, whether by chance or fate, she couldn't help but feel that old spark of attraction. She couldn't deny the way her heart raced, the way her stomach fluttered when he was near. One evening, just as the sun was beginning to set and the sky turned a soft shade of pink, Clara stood outside the house, gazing out at the vast, open fields. The air was cool and fresh, a reminder of the simple beauty of life on the ranch. She'd always loved the quiet peace that came with the land, the way everything seemed so still and calm. But today, the silence felt different, charged, almost as if the world was holding its breath. She didn't realize Graham had approached until he spoke, his voice low and steady. "You're out here again," he said, standing a few feet away, his hands in his pockets. Clara turned to look at him, her heart skipping a beat. "I was just thinking," she said, a bit surprised by the calmness in her own voice. "About everything, I guess." Graham nodded, his gaze shifting toward the horizon. It's easy to get lost in the land out here. Makes you think about a lot of things. Clara wasn't sure what to say next. They had never been good at talking about their feelings, not back then, and certainly not now. But there was something different in the way Graham was looking at her, something that felt almost like an invitation. Her mind raced, but her heart seemed to guide her more than her thoughts. She took a step closer to him, her voice quieter now. I didn't come back here to deal with all of this. She motioned to the wide open space around them. I thought I could just take care of things and leave again. But it's harder than I thought. Graham turned to face her fully now, his expression softening. I didn't think you'd come back at all. Not after everything that happened. Clara felt the weight of his words settle between them. There had been so much unsaid, so much left hanging in the air between them. She could feel the old pain bubbling up again, the bitterness of how they had parted ways. I didn't expect to be here, she admitted, her voice tinged with regret. But I guess life doesn't always go the way we plan. The tension between them was thick now, and Clara could feel the pull of it, like an invisible force drawing them closer. She didn't know what to do with the feelings that had resurfaced feelings she thought she'd buried long ago. But standing here, with Graham in front of her, she realized how much she had missed him, how much she had missed the connection they once shared. Before she could think too much about it, Graham took a step forward, closing the space between them. His presence was overwhelming, his strength almost tangible. He didn't say a word, but the way he looked at her told her everything she needed to know. It was like nothing had changed. He still wanted her, just like he always had. And for a moment, Clara allowed herself to feel that pull, to remember what it had been like to be with him. It happened so fast, faster than Clara could process. Graham's hand reached out and gently cupped her cheek, his touch warm and familiar. He leaned in, and before she could pull away, his lips were on hers. The kiss was slow at first, tentative, as if they were both unsure of what to do next. But then, as the tension melted away, the kiss deepened, and everything felt right again. Clara's heart raced as she wrapped her arms around him, her body responding to the way he held her close. It had been so long since she'd felt this way, so long since she'd allowed herself to be with someone like this. But with Graham, it felt like no time had passed at all. They pulled apart after a few moments, both breathing heavily, their foreheads resting against each other. Clara's mind was spinning, but her heart was calm. This was where she belonged. This was where she had always belonged. But even as she stood there with him, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. Something had always been missing, and it wasn't just the years they had spent apart. It was the unresolved pain from their past, the things they had never said to each other. Graham pulled away slightly, his hands still on her arms. Clara, we can't keep pretending like nothing happened. We both know it's not that simple. Clara looked up at him, her breath catching in her throat. I know, she whispered, her voice barely audible. But what do we do now? Graham seemed to hesitate for a moment before answering. I don't know, but I do know that I never stopped wanting you, and I don't want to lose you again. Clara closed her eyes, trying to process his words. She had spent so many years running from this place, from him, because she was afraid of getting hurt again. But standing here, with him in front of her, she realized that maybe the real reason she had left was because she had been afraid of how much she loved him. I never stopped wanting you, either, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. The silence between them was thick now, filled with everything that had been left unsaid. But this time, Clara didn't feel the need to run. She didn't need to figure everything out right away. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to feel the love that was still there, the love that had never truly gone away. Graham's hands gently cupped her face, and he kissed her again, this time with more certainty. The kiss was soft but full of promise. It was everything Clara had been missing and everything she had been too afraid to admit. She still wanted Dot as they pulled apart again. Graham took her hand, his touch firm but tender. Let's take this one step at a time, he said quietly. No rush. We don't have to figure everything out today. Clara nodded, feeling a sense of peace settle over her. She didn't need all the answers. For the first time in a long while, She was just happy to be with him, to be here. In the moment, the days that followed were filled with quiet moments like this, shared glances, soft touches, and conversations that had been long overdue. They spent time together, working side by side on the ranch, slowly rebuilding the connection they had once lost. Clara knew it wouldn't be easy, that the past would always linger. But she also knew that they had a chance to make it right. As the days turned into weeks, Clara began to realize that coming back to the ranch hadn't been a mistake. It had been exactly what she needed. And maybe, just maybe, coming back to Graham was the best decision she had ever made.